Senator Chambers, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Nankus. Members of the legislature, what is before us is the amendment, not the bill itself. Were this amendment not to be in the bill, the same people who don't like the amendment would be saying, why are not you going to let the churches abide by their doctrine? If their doctrines are against this or that, why are you going to make it against the law for them to go along with their doctrine? They are just so rock-ribbed set against doing anything to protect our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters that they flip-flop on this issue. If it were not considered, they'd be upset because we're going to force the churches to go along with something they don't believe in. We're going to put it into the bill, so now they're saying, well, why are you going to exempt the churches if you're going to make everybody else go along with it? The level of the debate is very unsatisfactory. Nebraska as a state does not enjoy high status anywhere in the country or the world when it comes to intellectual pursuits. Nebraska is the butt of everybody's joke. The kinds of provisions in the state constitution, the unwillingness of the legislature to protect the rights of all people to a job, mark Nebraska for what it is, a hotbed of bigotry. The Christians are the ones who bring that religion in here every day, not me. They're the ones who talk about their principles. Then when they don't live in accord with them, they don't want me to call attention to it. Then keep them to yourself. The only one who hollers is the one that the rock hits. If people are in favor...
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Cruz, followed by Senator Friend, Senator Fulton, Senator Chambers, Senator Carlson, Senator Avery. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I stand in strong support of the amendment. Some have questioned what the need for that is. I think there's a clear need because there is a difference in doctrine of various churches. This is not a question of who's right or who's wrong, but it is their doctrine. And if they have a person in their employ that they want to convey a particular belief or doctrine, they have a right to ask them to do that. And that would exclude, in some of their opinions, would exclude persons who are openly gay or lesbian. So the churches need to have that kind of protection and exemption. In the discussion which have been following and which is really encouraging in some ways because we've kept talking, but discouraging in other ways because we don't have much focus. The question before us is a matter of appearances, and I keep hearing references to behavior. Behavior is not before us. I have dealt with this issue for decades in various groups, and I know of no exception to it. We're not talking about behavior. We are talking about appearances. It is my professional judgment that about 1/3 of the gays in Nebraska are married. This is their way of finding safe haven from the prejudices and the barbs of society. But some of these persons are clearly gay. They have the bone structure, they are built that way, they are wired differently, they walk differently. They have a different kind of a voice box, and those that are consider themselves expert in this can spot these persons as gay and label them so that some have had to go and get their spouse in order to make them appear legitimate. Well, this is ridiculous. If the person's doing the good work that needs to be done and is not a disruption to the society, and I would agree that being appropriate in behavior around all persons is an important thing for gay and straight alike. We try to do that here. We try to do that throughout society. But if a person is appropriate in their behavior, then they should be judged on the basis of what they can do and produce, and not on the basis of what I imagine their personal behavior to be. Since I have had to deal with this in extended courses and so on, I can assure you that I really don't want to imagine what some heterosexual behavior is. I really don't want to think about it. I really don't want to put that person into that peg. I really don't need that if I'm going to treat this person in an even sort of way. Well, that's what we're talking about here. Put our imaginations away and judge the person by what they can do and not by their appearances. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Friend.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the legislature. I've been listening, I guess, pretty closely, and I appreciate the debate. And what I've heard on several occasions is that Senator Avery pointed it out, and I think I understand his point, that this bill isn't outlandish, it isn't dangerous, there isn't a whole lot of turf here that hasn't been dredged up before, especially in other states. I agree. I agree with that. But I do think that this bill is simply put, pretty difficult, if not impossible, to implement, and pretty difficult to apply effectively. And here's one of the reasons that I feel that way. If you look out at citizens, at people in our society who are not protected, that consider themselves a certain class. Let me give you an example. I know a guy at work, at where I work in Omaha, can't be any more than, I'm guessing here, an adult male, can't be any more than maybe 4'5". Now some would say, well, that falls under a disability. Well, I beg to differ. He doesn't think he's disabled, but I'll guarantee in his life he's been discriminated against. Guarantee it. The first thing that I thought when I looked at him is I said, in my head, I said, that poor guy. Is that fair? Fair that God made him that way? I don't think so. I'll guarantee he's been discriminated against. I'll guarantee he's lost a job because of his height. I'll guarantee he hasn't been advanced in a particular position that he's in because of his height. Sometime in his life. I think he worked at the bank. I don't know. I saw him at the bank. I'm not really sure. He worked somewhere. He had a suit on. He worked in that environment somewhere. Let's talk about another group. Let's talk about the guys with really, really large noses, bad, ugly looks about them, if you will. They don't classify themselves in any particular way. I'll guarantee they're discriminated against, folks. But here's the most pertinent thing, I think. Let's talk about people that have virtually their own classification, and that's obese people. Now, some morbidly obese people would fall under a, my guess would be, according to a lot of legal experts, would fall under some disability laws in certain states. What about a guy that's 5'11" and weighs 300 pounds? You think his boss is going to send him to Atlanta to meet with the board of directors and be real excited about that prospect? They're discriminated against. It happens every day. I'm worried about that too. I'm talking about applicability of our laws. How do we apply them? And are we effective in applying them? I just pulled up we can find this. It was published on the 17th. Boston, Massachusetts. The International Herald Tribune reports this.
minute.
Legislation to add weight and height to anti-discrimination law in Massachusetts has been proposed to give special protection to short and fat people. Representative Byron Rushing, a Boston Democrat who is sponsoring the bill, said it is a question of civil rights. This is one of the last physical aspects of people that you can acceptably laugh about, said Rushing, who is black, slim, and of average height. You can be a shock jock on the radio and talk about fat people for a solid week, and no one will ever think of having you lose your job. It's still acceptable. It's not fair, says some people. Then there's other people that are saying, you know what, we might as well add colorblind, left-handed, allergic to cashews, and get it over with. You know what? I don't know where to go with this. I got to be honest. But I'll tell you this, we are trying to save, if we really think we can save the world from inside of this place, we've got another thing coming.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Avery yield to a question?
Senator Avery, would you yield to a question?
You bet I will.
Well, firstly, thank you for stepping up and engaging this debate. Okay. You had mentioned, I'm not quoting perhaps precisely, but you said something to the effect that we should not discriminate based on who we are. And as a general statement, I think most people should agree with that. Why I'm curious about this is because there are certain areas where that could be perceived as discrimination. And so I'm going to ask if the gay marriage bill or the gay marriage constitutional amendment, do you believe that homosexual couples should be afforded the societal benefits and identity of marriage?
No, I do not. Because marriage is a religious ceremony. I believe, however, that gay couples deserve legal rights.
Well, I'm not talking about the religious aspect of marriage, specifically the societal protection or the statutory protections of marriage, those afforded by the state.
Well, you know what you're employing is the look over there strategy. This is about discrimination in the workplace. It's not about gay marriage. It's not about civil unions. Don't play that game.
Well, I understand that this bill is not, but the principle at work here is whether that could be – there are those who would accuse you of being discriminatory. And I agree with you on that issue. And I would say that this is an institution afforded by the state which should be recognized by which a man and a woman are recognized as eligible for this gift of society or for this recognition by society. Thank you, Senator Avery. I'll continue making that point. There are those who would say it's discriminatory to disallow two males or two females to be married within society, within Nebraska. I mean, we saw it in the newspaper. This was a hot topic some years ago. That's discriminatory. You're discriminating against them because of a sexual orientation, sexual preference. And I would say no. And there are those in this body who would support 475 who wouldn't have supported gay marriage. So there's a line, certain things that they will draw a line, a demarcating line. And they can be accused of discrimination, but they are not. Senator Avery I don't believe he's being discriminatory in having that position. That's a legitimate position. Another example that came to mind. I'm a heterosexual male. That means I'm attracted to other women. Yet I have made a decision, taken a vow, to not have relations with any other woman other than my wife. And if one asks me if I'm the better for doing so, I will say yes. Yet, I am built to have this attraction to other women. That I have that attraction does not mean I have to act on it. And so the argument that this is a big can of worms, nature versus nurture, I'd submit to you that if we want to be reflective, if we really want it to be reflective of how our laws ought to encompass those of us who are created sexual in a certain way, then our laws ought to allow those married couples to have relations with others whom they are attracted to. Consenting adults, mind you.
1 minute.
I'm not positive whether Nebraska's law says this, but one cannot. One can't be married to two people. So if we're going to utilize the argument that we need to make our laws encompassing of who we are sexually, if I grant you the argument that it is a matter of nature, sexual orientation, which I would dispute, but let us say and assume that it is a matter of nature. It is also a matter of nature that heterosexual males and females are attracted to members of the opposite sex. And yet we have laws in place that recognize and reward behavior within the confines of one man, one woman. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Fulton. And, Senator, that was your third time. Senator Chambers, followed by Senator Carlson and Senator Nanka. Senator Chambers, and this is your third time.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, I'm listening to this debate, so-called. This is some of the silliest stuff I've ever heard in my life. We're talking about people being able to get a job. And Senator Harms stomps out of here angry after saying that he doesn't think a person should be discriminated against because of his or her sexual orientation, but there shouldn't be a law to protect them because you shouldn't put them in the category with race, religion, and so forth. That's illogical. Senator Fulton brings up same-sex marriage. We're talking about employment, the right to have a job. And I'm listening to all this crazy insanity. And if it was somebody who meant something to you and you based it on something other than sexual orientation, which seems to put your mind in a tizzy and you cannot think rationally, then you would be coming to me saying, Ernie, I got a relative and they were mistreated by HHS or the schools. Will you help? We're talking about a job. So why bring up all this other trash that has nothing to do with it? You know why I call it trash? Because it's totally irrelevant, but it's something people can hide behind and pretend. I guess Senator Fulton thinks that if there was a homosexual person in his chamber, he got to watch out because they try to marry him and drag him home with them. I don't even believe a homosexual man would be drawn to somebody like that. Now, I don't know for sure, but I think they have standards too. Somebody who's going to be that narrow-minded, that intolerant? Good Lord. I'm listening to this. If I sneeze hard, I'll be, well, I admit to 70 years old. And I'm still hearing this kind of conversation in the legislature where we're supposed to be talking about the rights of all people. Businesses didn't speak against this bill. It's all these sanctimonious, self-righteous, religious people come in here talking about it violates their religion. Well, they've got a job. And they can't be discriminated against for believing in that silliness as I see religion. But they're protected under the law. And they think they should be protected under the law. And despite the fact that they've got all this protection, they're against others. And they'll say, I don't know of anybody personally discriminated against like that. I tell Senator Fulton, I've never met a Filipino who told me he or she was personally discriminated against. So there's no discrimination against Filipinos. Catholics won't let women be priests. And Senator Christensen back there talking about, well, the church can't do this and church can do that. They discriminate against women. A priest cannot be a nun, although some might like to be. This is crazy. I can't believe what I'm hearing here today. Children in high school would have a more intellectual, high-level discussion than what we're having here. They wouldn't be bringing up all this stuff, same-sex marriage and God this and God that. Leave God in church. Y'all bring God into the chamber. Then when I take him on and you all as a spokesperson, you get mad at me. then don't bring that which is holy and sacred to you into this chamber. But if you bring it here, it's just like, as I say, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Goofy. We're talking about somebody having the right to work. And I don't know that I've heard a person stand on this floor and say, I believe that people should be denied a job based on their sexual orientation alone. None of them will get up and say that. They're not that honest. I haven't even heard Senator Carlson say that. But they're against something in the law that would give redress to people who are denied a job on that basis alone. I don't mind them being put in the category with race, where I reside, color, where I reside, national origin, where I reside. This house is big enough for everybody. It ought to be. But those who have that protection want to deny it to others. I can't believe what I've heard this afternoon. But this is the reality that I have to contend with. This is the milieu in which I operate, and I shall continue to do so. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Carlson, followed by Senator Sinowicki. Senator Carlson, this is your third time.
Mr. President and members of the legislature, I'm going to take off a little bit on something Senator Harms said about choices and about some groups that don't have protection. I look at our pages, attractive group of people. Now, I don't know what the rules are and how they go about applying for those positions, but I don't think that they come in here with a bunch of piercings that they're going to be hired. That group that likes to pierce everything, they're not protected. But I don't think they're going to get this job. Dress must have something to do with dress. They all look pretty nice. Wear those ties. Matt, I don't know how often you wear a tie, if you enjoy it. But you're conforming to get this job, and most of you smile most of the time. I don't think it's too bad. Whatever kind of dress you wear, you're not protected in that dress. You have a choice when you come here to work as to whether you're going to conform with the dress code or not. Hair. When I was a football and baseball coach, I made the rules. And I paid attention to hair. And I look over these young men, and if they were going to play football or baseball for me, almost all of them would pass. Senator Chambers, if you were going to play football for me, you got to cut that beard. But then you'll have a choice whether you play for me or not. We don't have a protected class in how they wear their hair. And I will say this, and may be difficult for you to believe after you've heard some of the things that I've talked about today. If I'm hiring somebody because they may or may not be gay, that's not going to be the deciding factor as to whether I hire them or not. Whether a young lady's a lesbian, I don't think that's going to be the deciding factor as to whether or not I hire them. But I don't think that there is necessary for a separate protected class. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Carlson. Senator Sinowicki.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. Senator Chambers, will you yield to a question?
Senator Chambers, would you yield to a question?
Yes, I will.
Senator Chambers, I'd like to kind of bring this debate back to basics, if you will. Essentially what you're doing here with LB's 475 is if an individual applies for employment, that prospective employer cannot discriminate based upon the individual's sexual orientation, meaning that he's homosexual.
Yes.
And likewise, if that person is a current employee, that the employer cannot discriminate or cannot fire that employee based solely upon the fact that he or she might be homosexual.
That's correct.
I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Yes, that's all.
I'll give the remainder of my time to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, you have a little over 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Sinowicki. We could have had a discussion here this afternoon that would have been informative, enlightening, educational. But people watching will have no idea what we're talking about. All it is a job. I was educated at a Jesuit university. The Jesuits are supposedly the soldiers of the Pope, whatever that means. But in any branch of Catholicism that I'm aware of, the right to earn a living, the right to shelter, food, the basics of life are rights that belong to every human being. The right to earn a living is basic in this country and even in Nebraska based on what the law says. Again, nobody has stood on the floor and said forthrightly that you should discriminate against people in employment based on gender alone, based on sexual orientation alone, based on religion alone, or any of the other things that are already cataloged. We're not talking about anything other than the right to have a job. I tell young people that if you are going to get a job, you might want to dress like me, but if you need the job, dress the way they tell you to dress. But clothing has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Down through the years, the level of debate in Nebraska has not been elevated on this subject. Senator Carlson has two of the most delightful little grandchildren I've ever seen. I'm wondering how they could have a grandfather who would be against them having a job if they grew up and happened to be homosexual in their orientation. Would he tell that employer, these are my grandchildren, I love them, but if you don't like them because they're homosexual and you don't want to give them a job, okay. I don't believe that. He may not know as much about himself as I know about him. There are people who come to me because a family member is gay or lesbian. And there have been some in this legislature. And when they tell me, I ask, why don't you want it known that your child is gay or lesbian, as the case might be? Well, I live in a small town, it'd be embarrassing, and people would ostracize.
1 minute.
Okay. Now, you're worried about that happening to you because you're the father. Your child that you brought into the world has nobody in his house that he can go to for support. And he'd come to me before he'd go to you. He knows what your attitude is, and you brought him in the world, and you cannot speak up for him. And you're afraid of what these people in your town will think about you as his father, so you leave your child out there alone, unprotected, naked, and you brought him into this world. I wouldn't want to be that way. I wouldn't want people to feel that because I've shown so much hatefulness toward a group who really need a voice, that they can't come to me. People without a voice, the ones who are most marginalized, need somebody who is an advocate. And the more they need an advocacy, the more ferocious that advocacy should be. I am forced to deal with these issues in the way that I deal with them because of the attitude of the people I have to try to persuade.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Whiteman, followed by Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the legislature. I have not spoken on this issue and had almost decided that I would not. But I would like to ask Senator Chambers a question or two, if he would.
Senator Chambers, would you yield to some questions?
Yes, I will.
First of all, Senator Chambers, I have relatives that belong to the lesbian community, and certainly I wouldn't discriminate them. I think I have the same amount of love for them as I do anyone else. But tell me, if this law passed and I hired someone in my law office who was a gay, and I wouldn't have any problem with that, but I want to know what my rights are after I hire that person. And say he had he and his live-in partner, or whoever it may be, publicly displayed their affection in front of my office, do you think that would cause any clients or persons
First of
maybe
all,
to...
excuse me, if you didn't have 15 or more employees, it wouldn't apply to your law office. Secondly, there's conduct which carried on in public would be inappropriate for anybody, not just based on their sexual orientation. If you had a man and a woman working in your office and they engaged in these public displays of affection in front of your office, it could have the same impact. So I'm not talking about inappropriate behavior and conduct at the workplace. I'm talking about orientation. And that also includes somebody accusing a person of being gay or lesbian, and it's an accusation because that status is looked down upon and scorned to such an extent in the society.
Don't you think, Senator, that there are members of the gay and lesbian community that would test that, and let's say you fit within a group that have 15 or more employees?
Well, whether they tested it or not is no basis for determining the kind of laws that we enact. There are people who will test all kind of laws. Heterosexual people will. So that is no reason not to enact this law.
Well, it's my opinion that there are many members of that gay community who would challenge that, and you probably would end up before the Equal Opportunity Commission.
Well, you don't know that, Senator Whiteman, because a lot of people who are gay don't want to acknowledge it, not only because they might be discriminated against in the workplace, but in the community, in the neighborhood where they live. If they have children who go to school, and for some people's information, there are gay people who will marry a member of the opposite sex and produce children. So it's a very complex situation that they confront, and it's so complex because of the attitude of others toward them.
Don't you think that if I'm an employer and I employ 15 people and I have, let's say, a male that is working for me and he has a public display of affection out in front of my office, I can probably fire that male who is having the public display with a female much easier and without the risk of some repercussions under this proposed bill than I could if I discharged either a male or a female that was having a public display of affection with someone of the same sex.
But, Senator Whiteman, if you have a business and you have a code of conduct which is reasonable and applies equally to all, then a person has notice, and if those principles are violated, termination can result. And if you're complying with a reasonable code of professional conduct, then they can sue you as much as they want to, but they won't get very far. They probably would be subject to a motion to dismiss.
I'll probably be defending myself. I guess I also have a question with regard to depriving them, they and their male partner or female partner, of benefits as well.
That's not what we're talking about. And remember, Senator Whiteman, no business person or organization opposed this bill. They weren't worried in the way that you are.
Well, I have some concerns in that regard. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Chambers.
Thank you, Senator Whiteman. Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I've been sitting here most of the afternoon listening to this debate, and I already have my opinion, and I know how I'm going to vote, and I really didn't have a need to get up and say anything. But there's a few misconceptions that I thought it was important to correct for the record. I heard one of our members get up and say that he thought it was wrong that we hire homosexuals as teachers because there'd be too much temptation there. We're making a very simple and common mistake. We're confusing homosexuality and pedophiles. They're not one and the same. It's different. And to make the assumption that they are the same is nothing but bigotry. You can deny bigotry all you want, but if that's the way you think, that's bigotry. I get emails every day, and I will tell you that people think that if a Latino speaks Spanish, he's illegal. Bigotry. I'm sure Senator Chambers can tell you exactly the same thing about the black population. Bigotry alive and well in Nebraska, whether we want to admit it or not. It's there. When I worked at Central Catholic in Grand Island years ago, I had a good friend that graduated from there, went on to college, University of Wyoming. Went out on his bicycle one day for a ride in the country. Comes around a hill, and there's another young man staked to a cross, dead, beaten to death and burned. Why? Because he was homosexual. Senator Carlson, you were making a comparison with the pages up there. That's the difference between homosexual and being a page and have to go by certain standards. Homosexual people, their standards are a little bit different, and they have to put up with a lot more. I'm one that doesn't believe in any kind of discrimination if possible. And that's all this bill does, is try to eliminate some discrimination. I'd yield the rest of my time to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, about 240.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Aguilar. I'd like to read something. The son of an immigrant said he had always been taught to accept people for who they are, not what they are. Experiencing discrimination because of his ethnicity was surprising to him at first, he said. Quote, "It always took me aback. It's given me a whole different perspective." Senator John Harms. When he suffered the discrimination because of his Greek ethnicity, it took him aback. When you catch people with their guard down, they will let you know what they really are. I'm going to tell you all what I know. The people in this chamber are better than what they're showing themselves to be by the words they're speaking and the position they're taking. They fear political repercussions. Left to express their true view and what ought to be done. And nobody would know. This bill would pass easily. You wouldn't have found the tortured discussions that we've had this afternoon, the irrelevancies brought in to deflect our discussion from the simple point that this bill deals with, the right of a person to have a job and not be discriminated against when it comes to obtaining the job, holding the job, procuring advancement based on his or her merit, and not being discharged inappropriately based on sexual orientation.
1 minute.
You all don't know whether I'm gay or not. If I told you, like Senator Fulton, I'm a heterosexual man, how do you know that's true? Maybe because I'm gay, I'm always fighting for the rights of gay people, because maybe I'm fighting for myself. You don't know that, do you? I've got children and grandchildren, but that doesn't mean anything. A gay man produces semen and sperm. A gay man can impregnate a woman. A gay man can have children. You don't know what I am. And you'd probably say, wow, I feel easier about you because I know you're gay than I did about the fact that you're black. Because I know some fine white gay men. But what difference has it made? Senator Carlson, now that that question is there, he doesn't like me as much as he used to, because if he does, they might think, there's something funny about him. He got sugar in his britches, too. That's the thing these kind of people have to hear. It's what they have to put up with.
Time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Further senators wishing to speak on Judiciary Committee Amendment 399? No lights are on. Senator Ashford, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Let me remind the body that this is an amendment that solely exempts from the provisions of the Act religious institutions and related nonprofit organizations. Let me just, I would close there. There's been plenty of discussion, but I was so struck by Senator Aguilar and his comments. I just want to emphasize those that, as he said, he didn't think he was going to speak, but he was moved to speak, and I thought that his comments were moving. Let me just briefly give you some foundation for this amendment. In my mind, the reason we exempt religious institutions is because many religious institutions consider homosexuality as a sin. They have those religious institutions have a perfect right to believe that. But when those types of feelings about groups of people translate into a denial of a job, many, many states, 17 states, more states each year, have determined, their legislatures have determined, and their governors have signed legislation which clearly state that sexual orientation, that denial of a job for sexual orientation is discriminatory and actionable. I thought Senator Whiteman actually asked some good questions. I think that's the kind of debate that needs to happen. What are we talking about? What sort of conduct are we talking about? Because that's what the courts look at when they determine whether or not, or the EEOC or whichever agency is assigned the job of investigating these cases, determine whether or not the job action that was taken was violative of the Act. And I thought that was helpful. But at its essence, this amendment simply recognizes that there are religious beliefs that conflict with this statute. And as such, consistent with other statutes across the country, this bill and this committee, the Judiciary Committee, felt that it was appropriate that we make this exemption for the reasons I believe that I stated. With that, Mr. President, I'd urge the adoption of AM 399.
Thank you, Senator Ashford. You have heard the closing to the Judiciary Amendment AM 399. The question before the body is, shall AM 399 be adopted to LB 475?
Call of the House.
We do have a request for a call of the House. The question before the body, shall the House be placed under call? All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay. Have all voted who wish? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
32 ayes, no nays, to place the House under call, Mr. President.
The House is placed under call. All unexcused senators, please report to the chambers. All unauthorized personnel, please step from the floor. The House is under call. Senators, also please record your presence. Senator Heidemann, Senator Cornett, Senator Wallman, the House is under call. Senator Ashford, as we wait, how would you like to proceed?
Roll call vote.
Senator Wallman, the House is under call. Mr. Clerk, all senators are present. Senator Ashford states that it's okay to go with a machine vote. So the question at this time before the body is, shall AM 399 be adopted to LB 475? All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. Have all voted who wish. Please record, Mr. Clerk.
25 ayes, 8 nays, Mr. President, on adoption of committee amendments.
Committee Amendment AM 399 is adopted. The call is raised. Do you have items for the record, Mr. Clerk?
2, Mr. President, thank you. New resolution, Senator Preister 215, will be laid over. And I've noticed a hearing from the Judiciary Committee signed by Senator Ashford. Mr. President, with respect to Legislative Bill 475, the next motion I have is by Senator Erdman. He would move to indefinitely postpone the bill. Senator Chambers, you'd have the option to lay the bill over.
We'll take it up.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to open on your motion number 82 to indefinitely postpone.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, I thank you. I have been listening to this discussion, and to an extent I can agree with Senator Chambers as to the quality of the debate. I will tell you that as we have embarked this legislative session on a number of legislative issues, it probably has been, the debate has been more appropriate, I would probably say, that use that terminology, than the one that we have engaged in. Part of that, I think, is due to the fact of conceptions or perceptions, and part of that is due to the fact of the nature of the topic. Senator Shimmick hands out a sheet that has a great list of employers that currently have in their non-discrimination policy as a business, that they have a policy that says that they shall not discriminate based on, I'm assuming the term is sexual orientation. The language that was handed out just says orientation. But you go through this and you see that there are a number of businesses that have already adopted that policy on their own. I'm not going to make the assumption that every business that's not listed there does discriminate. I'm also not going to make the assumption that every state that doesn't have a policy similar to 475 discriminates either. But I think it's appropriate for us to discuss this, and simply what this motion allows us to do is decide whether the support is here to advance this bill or not. There's two ways you can do it. You can put up a motion to indefinitely postpone, or you can vote on general file and see where we end up. There are a number of other amendments that are designed to be clarifying to the bill. And if the body decides that there's sufficient votes to go forward with the bill, then we should take those up and spend the necessary time to make the bill better should it become law. I'm interested, though, in some of the comments that have been made, specifically with the way that the bill is written. Senator Nankus and Senator Ashford said that the amendments that will follow will clarify the definition that's in the bill. The only definition that I'm aware of that applies to the bill is the one that Senator Chambers gave us the last time we debated this bill. Senator Chambers' definition says that the only class or the only group of individuals that this term sexual orientation is designed to address are homosexuals. That was his definition, and I believe the comment was everyone knows that. And yet, as we get up and start discussing what the definitions are, there isn't that common understanding. In fact, if you look at the 18 states that have passed laws dealing with sexual orientation as a protected class, of the 8 or 9 that actually have written a definition, none of them are identical. So there is some discussion, and I appreciate Senator Nankus passing out the information from the State Bar Association. I think this is appropriate for us to analyze these issues. We may not agree. We may not agree that this rises to the level of protection. Just because you have something written in law that says that you can't discriminate based on age, race, those areas, or those protected classes, isn't necessarily mean you can't discriminate in those areas either. The courts have ruled on that. But before I go there, I would also point out that previous versions of this bill have had different exemptions in it as well. LB 19 was introduced by Senator Chambers, would have prohibited the discrimination against sexual orientation, would exclude the prohibition against discriminating against sexual orientation from any bona fide religious organization or employer who is engaged or responsible for the care of education of children under 18 in a residential care facility. There had to be a reason that was in there. Maybe it was political, and I think Senator Chambers understands the political process, and I think that's why the last amendment was proposed. You have to understand the entity in which you're in. But let me go and talk just briefly about something that I think is a good basis to deal from, and if we as a body decide that we're going to go forward with this bill, we can vote this motion down, and we can fix the bill and move on. There are three general distinguishable characteristics or areas that the court will rule under heightened scrutiny that a class must fall under to qualify as a disadvantaged class. One, they have not been subject to discrimination. If they haven't been subject to discrimination, they don't qualify. Senator Chambers and others have displayed examples here on the floor where they believe that burden has been met. The second one is they do not exhibit obvious, immutable, or distinguishable characteristics that define them as a discrete group. I would say that there's a disagreement in this body about whether that burden has been met. Senator Cruz, Senator Avery, and others would tell you that it's a distinguishable characteristic. Others would say that it's not, and in fairness to some, they said it doesn't matter to them. They believe that we should protect this based on what they would like to see done. The third area is that they are not a minority or politically powerless. And the last part I think is important, politically powerless. Study after study has done that groups that are politically powerless have been afforded the rights that are generally found in the protected class or a protected class of citizens. I would respectfully argue to you that there are groups, while they may be in a minority, are not politically powerless in today's society. They may be even more politically powerful than those in the majority, and maybe that's appropriate. But let me pose a question to you, and we'll see where the discussion goes. Senator Chambers and Senator Carlson have had some very candid exchanges this afternoon. Senator Chambers adequately, appropriately, and exactly pointed out that the church is not a building, that the church is not the stained glass, but the church is the people. And I believe, as Senator Carlson would also say, that the people are the temple, or those who are following the Bible would be the temple, the followers of Christ. And if the argument is that those individuals who attend that church should afford their leadership the opportunity to discriminate because they believe in that doctrine, I have to wonder out loud why that extension wouldn't go to those individuals who attend that church as well. The argument I've already heard back from Senator Chambers is, well, this is a right to employment. Therefore, they shouldn't be extended that right. Everyone has that right. Senator Nankus would also argue that LB 57, on the contrary to what her position was on that bill, is that everyone has a right to work. Under that bill, you pay your dues. If you don't, you get to go to court. And if you don't want to pay the dues or pay the fines, then you can quit your job. I think those issues are exterior to this debate. We have an exemption in here for bona fide religious organizations. If that's what the Catholic Church wants, fine. If that's what this body wants to accept as part of the other exemptions we provide, fine. But there's always a standard of why the exemptions are applied. If we're going to exempt the church organization, but not the temple, not the individuals who hold to that doctrine, I kind of have to wonder out loud why that exemption should be allowed. But I recognize we're in a political body. I have information that I can distribute. But I do hope, in respect to Senator Chambers and others, as I have done in this bill so far, I have tried to engage in an understanding of how the courts will interpret law, what's appropriate for us to include, and whether there's a demonstrated need. And I look forward to better debate than we've had so far. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Chambers is the primary principal introducer of LB 475. You have 5 minutes to respond.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, all I'm going to say on Senator Erdman's motion is that it ought to be defeated. This bill should not be killed. It is clear that the groups we're discussing are discriminated against in Nebraska. Some of the people out in the lobby say hateful things out there and other places. One of them even made hateful comments about homosexual people during the committee hearing and said that Martin Luther King would have agreed with him, and I lit into him and said people invoke Martin Luther King's name for a lot of things, but I wasn't going to sit and let him say that what his hateful stuff was what Martin Luther King was about. And there were committee members on the Judiciary Committee, and maybe they agreed with this guy. But I wasn't going to sit there and let Martin Luther King Jr.'s name be besmirched and sullied in the service of some of the most hateful things I've ever heard said by purportedly religious people about other human beings. My concern extends to convicted murderers. Senator Carlson, I would snatch them out of the hand of the executioner and say it's not for one man or woman or group of men and women to kill somebody else. That's how far my concern for human beings will go. And since I know that people who are homosexual or lesbian are discriminated against, I have no choice as long as I'm a member of this legislature other than to try to get something into the law that give those people protection and redress. How does it hurt me if somebody has access to the courts to vindicate a right that we all take for granted? And when I say we all, I'm speaking advisedly because black people are often discriminated against in employment because of our race. We are. But because of what happens to us, I don't need a whole lot of reading of the Bible or the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or social studies, opinion polls, and statistical analyses to know how devastating it can be when people hate you because of what you are. Not only do they hate you and demonstrate it, but they can take action to harm you and your family, and they do it. When I see people similarly situated, I want to help them. As I've said about children in school, I want nobody's child of any race to go through what I went through when I was a small child in public school. And even though different circumstances might put a white child in the frame of mind that I was put in by the way I was mistreated by teachers, I wouldn't want that white child to experience the emotions that I experienced. Isolation, abandonment, helplessness, vulnerability, set upon and attacked by the one you're supposed to respect. But it didn't weaken me. If anything, it made me what I am. Maybe if they treated me better in grade school, you wouldn't have me trying to help so many other people who have no voice. And I'm not apologetic about anything that I've said. And when people can sit here and be comfortable when others are mistreated by wrongful conduct, why are they going to try to get sympathy when all I use is words? And they have an opportunity to counter my words and deal with me in the same forum where I utter my words. We chafe under words, but are so insensitive and lacking in compassion that we feel no empathy toward people who are the victims of mistreatment. In America, 2007, the bastion of democracy and freedom, denying people the right to have a job. I think that is pathetic. I think it is pitiful. It is undemocratic. And I'm simply trying to make the promises that have been made to people by this country realities. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. We have the following senators wishing to speak on the motion to indefinitely postpone: Senator Ashford, Senator White, and Senator Erdman. Senator Ashford.
How's that getting a cigarette? That's not true. Thank you. And I would stand also in opposition to the motion for the reasons that Senator Erdman mentioned. He has discussed, on the last time we debated this bill, discussed the definition of sexual orientation and brought those issues up. And we, as a response to some of the discussion that we had involving the definition, we have researched the various statutes. And Senator Erdman is absolutely right. Every state, most states, have differing definitions of sexual orientation, though for the most part they are very, very similar. And there have been a number of court cases in the federal level and at the U.S. Supreme Court in the last 10 years or so that have affirmed definitions substantially of sexual orientation substantially similar to the definition that is in our amendment, the amendment I have filed later on. This is an important debate. I do think there is a significant difference between discrimination against someone who has a large nose or a small nose or is obese or not obese, though there certainly have been civil cases regarding discrimination on the basis of obesity. The difference between those kinds of cases and sexual orientation, of course, is that for centuries gays and lesbians have been discriminated against. And in this century, as I mentioned the other day, we all know about the discrimination that occurred, the state-sponsored discrimination that occurred against gays and lesbians in Nazi Germany and in the Soviet Union. It just happened. It happened, and it could happen again unless we are vigilant. My concern here is that there are views that are prevalent amongst groups and amongst religious groups, amongst others, who, as I mentioned before, who feel, for whatever reason, that homosexuality is a sin. That sort of thinking is within the purview and the right of the individual who believes that. What is of concern is when that translates into action against an individual, whether it's physical injury. We have a law against that, and I know there was some discussion earlier in the day about creating a new class. Well, we already have a class created. This legislature has determined that there is a definable class of individuals who are worthy of protection against physical injury, and that class, homosexuals, others who are injured or threatened, or where injury is threatened, physical harm is threatened. We've determined that that class exists. There are an abundance of cases, multitudinous number of cases, that have upheld those types of statutes, the hate crime statutes. And there are multitudinous numbers of cases that have upheld statutes similar to the one we are proposing here in states other than Nebraska in the area of employment. This is not a new or novel idea. This is an idea that has been tested. It is an idea that has been accepted by many states in this country, and it is being debated in other states as we speak.
1 minute.
It certainly is a matter that is worthy of debate. I think all the senators that have discussed the meat of the matter have raised good issues. And we need to continue to debate those issues, to come up with a standard that is acceptable to this body, and to move forward. But this certainly is not worthy of being indefinitely postponed, but is worthy of further debate and discussion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ashford. Senator White.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am privileged actually to go to my daughter's graduation and will be unable to stay for the rest of the debate and some of the votes, so I wanted to make my position quite clear. I support this bill. In my family, the obligation to work was one of the highest obligations a person has. I think most of us believe that anybody who is able must work. It's part of our obligation in a society that prides itself on self-sufficiency. With that obligation, to me, comes the right to work. I would urge my colleagues to recognize this does not just protect homosexuals. This protects heterosexuals as well. And in my career as a civil rights attorney, I've seen discrimination on both points. I don't really care what people think as to what the sexual activity of another human being is, right or wrong, sin or not. I think those all can be argued in good faith and held, certainly in good faith. But I come down to an immutable principle. In this country, you have not only obligation, but the right to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator White. Senator Erdman.
Mr. President, members of the legislature, let me either show my ignorance or display my knowledge and open the opportunity. Senator White stopped, and he's going to come back in, so maybe he's going to help me with the knowledge. But the access that you would have for remedy, or the opportunity that you would have for remedy, and again, you're talking about different issues. Senator Chambers is right. You can get up and argue constitutional rights. You can get up and argue statutory rights. You can get up and argue these different aspects of law. And he's right. You don't have to read that. And neither do I. But generally, if you go through the process of understanding how classes were arrived at either through court action or through legislative process, there's generally a distinguishable set of characteristics. And as I mentioned earlier, if somebody is going to try to create a remedy for something that isn't currently protected, they have to meet three general areas in the court. Obviously, in the legislative process, you don't have to meet a whole lot of burdens other than the fact that you can distinguish what that class is, and for the purpose of this bill, a definition would probably help that. But you can set that class up to be whatever you want so that individuals could not discriminate based solely on that purpose. That doesn't mean that there isn't other remedies. It just means that in this area of employment law, that you would have this protection afforded to you based on the political body of the state of Nebraska, and that's the legislature. Let me go back to, as a historical matter, these are the three characteristics, or these are the three tests, if you will. They have not been subject to discrimination. There are a lot of classes of individuals, whether they're born that way or have chosen or whatever application you want to make to that class of individuals, whether it's obesity, go down that list, or depending upon the debate on nature versus nurture on sexual orientation and those, the definition as we are yet to define would apply. Have they been subject to discrimination? That in itself does not rise to the level, as I understand the precedents of the courts and their interpretation of a protected class. It is one of the three prongs that must be analyzed. If the answer to that is yes, and you have been discriminated against, then you go to the other two. Or maybe they're not mutually exclusive in this order, but these are the three. They do not exhibit obvious, immutable, or distinguishable characteristics that define them as a discrete group. There are arguments about whether or not someone is distinguishable in whatever group they may fall into, and as Senator Chambers has pointed out, the complexion of your skin, depending upon which race you may fall into. Others have pointed out examples that are not being protected, nor are they protected constitutionally, such as obesity and other areas. There are different standards, if you will, that may be applicable and may not be applicable as to whether or not they fit within a discrete group. In other words, a distinguishable group that is identifiable. And then finally, they are not a minority, and then there's an or. It's read conjunctively. They are not a minority or politically powerless. I would argue that if you're going to get, by no understatement, the most powerful member of the Nebraska legislature to carry your legislation or to take the cause in which you believe is right for your minority, first of all, you're not politically powerless. Second of all, if you look at politics on a national level, numbers of organizations have become involved that are driving national policies reflective of the issues that we're debating today. Some of them are, as Senator Chambers is providing to us. It's a matter of fairness. Some are driving them as a matter of acceptance. And others are somewhere in between in the area of tolerance. The reason why you need LB 475, and other states have passed legislation similar to this, in my understanding of the law, is that because you can't meet the tests that the court would generally apply a protection. As Senator Chambers and I spoke of earlier, the courts, when they determined that the Equal Protection Clause would apply to the states, and I may not have this exactly right, but the courts interpreted a section of the Nebraska Constitution to make that a reality in Nebraska as well. They did not have to have the special legislation to create that situation or to create the remedy for those individuals who are being discriminated against. So these are somewhat different than the other listings that are there, and to be admitted, or to admit up front, religion is different. Because religious freedom was one of the founding principles of this country. That's both freedom to worship as you choose or freedom to not worship. And so it is somewhat different. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Further discussion on the motion to indefinitely postpone? No lights are on. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to close on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, again, I will tell you that this is a test for us to determine whether we proceed or not. And that's all it is designed to do. If a majority of the members vote in favor of this amendment, that will be a decision, and if a majority of members vote no, that will be the obvious decision, and we can proceed with other amendments that are filed. I have little else to add, and we will wait and see the outcome of this motion. Mr. President, I'd ask for a call of the House, please.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. There has been a request for the call of the House. The motion before the body is, shall the House be placed under call? All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay. Have all voted who wish? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
32 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, to place the House under call.
The House is placed under call. All unexcused senators, please return to the chamber. All unauthorized personnel, please step from the floor. The House is under call. Senator Erdman, all senators are present. How would you like to proceed?
Let's proceed with the machine vote, Mr. President.
We will proceed with a machine vote. Again, the question before the body is on the motion to indefinitely postpone LB 475. All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay. Have all voted who wish? Please record, Mr. Clerk.
24 ayes, 15 ayes, Mr. President, on the motion to indefinitely postpone.
Motion to indefinitely postpone fails.
President.
Senator Erdman.
Mr. President, pursuant to legislative rules, a motion to indefinitely postpone on general file requires a simple majority vote.
correction, those in the yeas do prevail. The call is raised.